So we're going to record. Okay, recording has begun. And then I can start the screen share.
It's ironic to be talking about the complications of using technology as we're using technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, yeah.
So the recording has begun. And once again, just for the purpose of recording, this is homeschooling recommendations to support parents of multilingual learners. We were pleased to welcome you. Thank you again. And we shared some stories, Sarah and I, from what's going on. We would love for you to share your stories as well. Also, just a formal introduction so you know who we are and why we're happy to be here sharing with you today. Sarah?
Sure. So I have a doctorate in applied linguistics. My area of expertise, ironically enough, is face-to-face teacher-student interaction. However, I've spent the last few years also working on online learning. And I teach teachers. I work with people who are going to be ESL teachers in public school settings and with current teachers who work with multilingual learners. I was also homeschooled starting from when I was 12 until I left to go to college. So one of the reasons I thought of doing this workshop is that I've been hearing from colleagues and friends who are suddenly homeschooling and saying what to do. And I wanted to offer some of my own, both professional but also personal experience.
And I am a teacher educator. My name is Teresa Bruno, and I'm a teacher educator at City University of New York, previously with Hunter College, now with City College. And I also work with schools and teachers here in Colorado now. I work mainly with teachers in TESOL, bilingual education, and special education, in a variety of settings. I also teach coursework in linguistics for teachers and literacy. I'm a part of New York State TESOL's executive board, and I'm happy to be involved in the leadership in our state and to be able to serve as a platform for us today. I've always been expressly interested in the relationship between parents, teachers, and students and working as community teams. So Sarah and I teamed up on this because I really am now all teachers are teacher educators and the teachers are the parents at home. So kind of enabling you and empowering you to teach parents how to support their kids at home. And that's why we're here today. So thank you. Just a few notes about technology. We are so honored to welcome such a robust and diverse audience. There are 100 people here via video because of the cap on my Zoom account, and others are in listening, but we cannot see their video. So the chat is disabled because it's we want to be realistic about, as online educators, what Sarah and I can handle, and we can't handle and manage a chat for 100 people, so we disabled that. But we do want to hear from you. We ask that you share your name and contact information via Google form. There is a link which you will not be able to click on because of this nature of presentation, but I included a QR code. So if you use your smartphone, you can lift it up to that QR code and it will take you to a Google Form. Or you can type in all those letters and numbers. Recall memory skill for typing. We'll ask everyone that they keep their microphone on mute to help reduce background noise for all listeners. As I mentioned, the chat is disabled, so make note of your questions. You can ask them in that Google Form link. I will also show this link again at the end. And we'll also send you a copy of the presentation slides and any other relevant resources once we get your email.
So let's take care of ourselves and each other.
Yeah. So as Teresa and I began to talk about what's happening right now, we felt like one of the most important things we could say and share, and we also, I want to say that I'm sure this is something that all of us are already thinking about, and we're aware that you're aware of this, but it felt absolutely crucial. We have to talk about the realities of this situation and how we learn, and the knowledge we all have that when we're anxious, we don't learn. The brain is wired to take care of itself, and when our most basic needs aren't met, learning isn't going to happen. And I think as educators, of course, we think, okay, we have to move forward, we have to keep educating, that's who we are. But we wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that actually probably our first priorities have to be the physical and emotional well-being of our students, their families, and I would add of ourselves. Right? So, of course, I keep thinking about many of the families I know of where there are real financial issues happening right now. There's food and shelter, and I'm sure other people on this call are thinking about that also, but also the kind of anxiety and uncertainty that as a society, as a globe we are facing is going to impact our learning. And I think it's so important for us as leaders and educators to acknowledge that, and acknowledge that as a model, acknowledging that for families and for our students. So maybe we can move on. Yeah. And with that in mind, one of the things we know about trauma in the brain is that the key to kind of unlocking trauma is connection. So the relationships that we have with our students, and the relationships that our parents have with their students are central right now. So one of the most important things we can do is encourage parents above all to prioritize relationship building to the extent that's possible. You know, different families are going to be in different situations, but doing homework is not actually our first priority right now. Right? Our first priority right now is connection and relationship, and making space for the feelings that we're all feeling in ways that are appropriate for children. And we wanted to just emphasize, it's going to be okay. You know, they're going to learn. It is going to be okay. And I think that if we can get that message across, I hear from parents who feel so stressed out, trying to manage their own jobs, trying to take care of their families, and then trying to keep up with schoolwork. And of course that's important. And of course the continuity and regularity of that is important. But let's acknowledge that it's not the most important. And, you know, children will learn. They are designed to learn. Let's make sure that our emotional needs are met and the relationships are built, and then we can move on to the next step. And it's funny, you know, I've been saying as I talk with fellow educators, I feel a sense of loss. I miss my students. I miss being in a room with them. And I know that the same is true for students, you know, so I think that's also something that we can model in our conversations with families and with parents, that it's real. We're all feeling those feelings, and undoubtedly our students are, the children are, the young people, and can we help families acknowledge that and, you know, be real about that as a reality, at the same time as we are real about the resilience, the amazing, joyful resilience that we can see in young people. You know, both exist. And Teresa, please jump in if you want to add anything here.
So now we're going to get, now that we've talked about, as we said, reality check, right? We do believe all of our students can learn even in these challenging situations, but we have to be kind to ourselves and take a moment and just acknowledge everything that's going on and say that it's okay if everything doesn't get done, and tell our parents and our students that too, and make sure that they're caring for each other and for themselves. Now we're going to get into kind of hopefully why you clicked in today about homeschool basics, what you can do at home and what you can tell your students and their parents to do at home. The first basic is setting up a space. I included a photo of my office this morning. This is my home office. You see the boppy pillow there? That's where I stick my baby while I pretend to try to keep her content, and I pretend to work. You can see there's like a nice old conference bag. I think that's nice Abe from last year. My cactus plants, the cacti are always, they're thriving through all of this. And then just kind of a ton of mess. And this is my space. This is my workspace. As you want to set up a space, just so no shame for anybody, right? This is what I'm logging on right now. So the space doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't even need to be good enough. There just needs to be space. And you can share that with your parents too, and just say, you know, are there ideal things, which Sarah's going to tell you about, that would be great to have in a space. But if it's not ideal, that's okay too. So Sarah, what would be more ideal than the mess that I'm logging in from?
I mean, that mess is fine. I'm not even going to share my space. But, you know, one of the things when I talk with homeschool parents, whether in this situation or, you know, when parents actually make the decision to homeschool, really we have to start with the basics, and the space is the first one. So this is actually like when I'm consulting with a family, the first thing I would say is, let's talk about making a space. And you know, for many years I was involved in a program called Kitchen Table Math. The space might be the kitchen table. So it's not like there has to be a desk, but the idea is that together, parents and children find the space where they're going to do their work together. And it is helpful if the child knows, this is where I'm going to put my books, here's the pen I have or the pencil I have, you know, whatever tools, and they can go here. This is where I'm going to put my notebook, right? And then there's kind of, it makes it feel more real and feel more regular. It's very grounding. One school that I worked with, the very first assignment was for children to draw a picture of their space and then share it with everybody else, right? So it's a very concrete kind of real step that we can offer parents that is actually key to successful working with children, because then we don't have to think about that every time, right? Then we just know, okay, we're just going to go here, and I know where my materials are. And that leads to then the next second step, which is routines, right? And again, I'm sure this is obvious. You know, as teachers, we're all about routines, but it's so important to share this with families and to realize that it takes time to set up a routine. So, you know, a first week might just be building the routine, and that's so worth it. Like, that time is time very well spent. So part of the space is the routine. Like, we know where we go to sit down. You know, I know the books that I'm going to get and bring with me. I know the chair that I'm going to be in, or the couch or the floor, you know, whatever it is, that there's that kind of familiarity with the space and with the first steps. So that, again, when it's time to homeschool, there's not this kind of panic of like, oh my gosh, where do we start? What do I do? I know the first step is to go to the place, right? There's the routine that may come from the school. There's the kind of like, these are the things, like this is the math, this is the English, this is the history. That's really important. But beyond that, there's the bigger family routine. And I wanted to emphasize some parts of that that are incredibly important for families, for whole children, and for learning. One is to take advantage of this time to build in quiet book time. It can be hard to find time for that in our lives, in our normal busy lives, and yet we all know how unbelievably crucial that is for cognitive development. So for parents to have as part of their routine every single day, quiet time, reading time. If the child isn't yet reading, it's quiet time to look at a book. And for a really young child, that might be 5 or 10 minutes. For an older child, you know, up to an hour, really depending. That's also time that's a pause for the parent. Right? So it has multiple purposes, but it's crucial. Free play, and I think Teresa's going to talk more about that, needs to be actually in the routine. It needs to be part of the schedule. It's that important. Movement, and particularly because our children are going to be even more connected to screens than they would have been, and many of our children may be confined inside. I think it's so important for us to talk to parents about ways to build movement. We know that movement builds neural connections. It's important cognitively, to say nothing of the fact that it's important to keep our children from like literally trying to climb, you know, the television set.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we brainstorm the kinds of movement, you know, if it's possible to get outside, that's golden. But if it's not, you know, what kinds of stretches can we do? What kind of dances can we do? Can we have family dance time every night, you know, 5-10 minutes? Whatever it is, building that into our day and making it an absolute part of the routine. I think chores are really important too, and that they're part of a schedule, and those are learning times. If it's possible, those are times for parents and children to be talking and interacting, doing that kind of relationship building. But it's also important for children to feel like they're part of the routine and the running of the household at this time.
Yeah, and we know that this does vary culturally.
Yes.
It's a family
Yeah.
situation. And we want to, again, convey to parents first that the sense of well-being matters. And this routine really does help provide a sense of security and structure for the children. Because they might be very fragile at this time, as are the adults. So we want to let them know that this is just a good structure. So we can have a structure, but then we can also defer from that. So we have a structure, but then we also add novelty. So it's also
Absolutely.
okay to set the routine up and then maybe not follow it. So
Mhm.
parents that confidence too, because they might have some insecurity about suddenly becoming the teacher, especially depending on some of their cultural ideas and their education background. So we want to empower them to say, no, you're the parent, you're the primary person who cares for your children, loves your children, and now you're the primary person who's teaching them. And this is just what you can do. And also, if you don't do
Yeah.
it this way, that's okay.
It's fine. And you know your child. So you know your family, you know what they need, you know what you need as a family. Um, One of the things that we know about homeschooling is that it doesn't take as long. And so parents may feel like, okay, my child is normally in school from like 8 to 3. They need to be doing schoolwork from 8 to 3. They don't. And in fact, it's better if they're not. I mean, and every parent is going to make that decision for themselves. But I think we can reassure parents that it's fine if it's 2 to 3 hours, or, depending upon the age of the child, it might be less, it might be more, but it doesn't have to match the school day. Um, One last thing is that it is helpful to recommend that parents decide for themselves how much screen time they're comfortable with. That's going to vary wildly, and that's appropriate because every family is different, but to think about it, make that decision, and then kind of build that into their schedule.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a moment to talk about play. And sometimes we can play to learn, but we also need to learn to play, especially at the early childhood level. I have a little picture here of one of my own personal favorite video game characters, Mario. Um, just, it's just been the best for the last 30 years. That's all I have to say. It's really important that we enable our children to play with learning games. There's a plethora of technology games out there, video games, computer games, but we can also remember the good old-fashioned games that we can do at home off technology, like musical chairs, hide and seek, Marco Polo, board games, card games, building games with a box of toothpicks, or building something with the deck of cards you got sick of playing Go Fish with. And all games are learning games. Even if your kid is stuck on Minecraft for 45 minutes, they're actually engaging with others. There's an interesting NPR about social engagement through online gaming recently. We just have to make sure it's part of the routine, and also it's supported for learning, and we're also learning how to play in a constructive way. And that also goes for independent play, helping students to have some kind of independent play, or to play well with other siblings, or relationships in the household again. You want to give your children choice and support your parents to give your children's choice. But asking, what do you want to do, is a very dangerous question, right? Just like we do at school, we want to help our parents give our kids false choice. A lot of parents know this and do this at home anyway. But depending on how it goes culturally, some parents don't always engage with their children with choice. So we want to make sure that they are engaging with their children with choice, and that it's false choice. It's option A or option B. Because when you've been cooped up for a couple weeks and you ask your kids, what do you want to do? You really don't want to hear the answer. So that's the hard part. So there's so many different things that you can give them choices to do, including sensory play. And there's some chores around the house too that create strategies for problem solving, like asking the kids to reorganize the room, the pantry. That helps with sorting and ordering. Anything really will work. Anything can become a game. We just have to stop and, as an adult, look at our space and our desires through the eyes of our child, and think about what kind of fun we can have. I also say this to you, and it's hard, and I like things to be neat and clean, which you wouldn't know by the picture of the office I showed you, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Get messy. Just let the kids make a mess and then make them clean it up. And that's okay. That's learning, right? That's part of problem solving strategies.
If I can jump in, when we're specifically thinking about our multilingual families, the kinds of conversations that parents and children have when they're playing and when they're doing the dishes, or I love the idea of like organizing the closet or the cabinet, that's golden. And it doesn't matter what language it's in. that's a way. So for younger children, what we're doing then is building connections between our verbal world and the physical world, which is the key cognitive task of young children. And for older children, we're building relationships with the family, and the parents are also modeling things like problem solving, right? So parents can be encouraged to narrate what they're doing. This is for chore time, and to really engage with their children in conversations about what's happening, and that's learning, right? And I also just want to toss in a plug for being bored. It's useful. It's a prime teaching tool. And I think it's really also important for us to empower parents to say, it's okay if your child is bored for a little while. That's actually when they're going to find that magic creative game. If we can just, it's a balancing act, and sometimes it leads to a mess that we don't want, but sometimes it's really okay. It is when real creative thinking and real creative play happens. Is after we kind of push through the first boredom.
And what Sarah touched on, and we mentioned it when we started, a lot of this you already know, and we didn't make a slide for it because as TESOL educators, you may already know this, but I'm realizing, looking at some of my colleagues who joined from other subject areas, it's okay if you don't speak English in the household, speak your home language with your children.
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to touch on when we talk about literacy. But you don't have to worry about not speaking English at home. Whatever languages you speak at home are the languages you want to enrich your children with. And we want to consistently remind that to parents. Don't feel bad if you can't do the English work at home. Language is a skill in itself. So support them in the home language, talk to them, be with them. And that is just as wonderful as working on the English.
Yeah. And they're not going to lose their English. Again, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? I think that message is so important.
This is a quote, kind of harkening back to routines, that it's one of those quotes that nobody really knows where it came from, but I use it a lot. Habits are cobwebs at first, cables at last. So we can use this time educationally to create really strong habits and really strong techniques and strong bonds within a family. But this also works in the inverse. It can kind of work for bad habits too, right? So we might see some difficult situations and difficult patterns picking up at home. I just wanted to bring that forward to notice both that a lot of wonderful things are happening at home, and good habits happening, and there are some, even in my own household, some not so great habits happening within my own self. Like I'm just eating everything, like all the time. There are no meal times anymore. I also have a small baby, so there haven't been meal times for a while, but yeah, we're just eating a lot of food. We've got a lot of food, and it's all shelf stable, which means it's not so great. So one of the not so great habits we're starting up is the quarantine 15, which some of you may be working on yourselves. But then there are also some great habits that we're working on as a family while we're all here at home, and that's taking walks. That's limiting our own screen time and our own news time as adults. And we're actually doing some more checking in with long distance family members because we have the time, which is kind of nice. So think about that too, encouraging parents to start good habits and not worry so much about bad habits, but just be aware of them.
Great.
So stories and books. Sarah?
Yeah. All right. So this is, again, thinking about multilingual families, that message of use your language, and that language is a gift to your child. And I think it's so important to remind parents that looking at books with your child is one of the most, if a family, the only thing they do educationally is look at books with their children for this chunk of time, that's amazing. That's so helpful, right? So, and for people who don't have books, pictures, so if there aren't books in the family, people can draw pictures, people can, whatever kind of images are there, sitting together and talking about them is an amazing gift in the language. And there's a particular thing that can be helpful for very young children, which is what we call pointing and naming. And this is when the parent uses their index finger and they point at specific images whatever it is that they're looking at, and they name them. And it's not like I point and I say red or book, but I talk about it. I say, oh, look, there's a book. And as I say the word book, I point at the word book. Oh, and there's another bigger book right there. And what I'm doing is I'm helping the child learn how to focus their eyes at specific places on a page and connect words with images, right? And that can get more and less complex. Parents can start by saying something like, this is a picture of a family. And then they start pointing out the details. And that's developing very important cognitive skills for young children. It's also developing connection. The parent is sitting next to the child. The two of them are focused together on the image or on the book. That's an incredibly helpful thing that our parents can do with students. And I think it's important for us to remind our families that whatever language they're using, that's a gift that's educationally really, really important. Of course, if it's a family that has access to books and where the parents are readers, reading aloud, right? So, and all the way up, so I have a 10-year-old, I'm certainly reading aloud to her during this time. My parents read aloud to me up into my teen years. And it was a beautiful, beautiful kind of thing that we shared as a family, and developed my listening skills, my concentration skills, so it's educationally helpful as well. But I also want to emphasize, I'm thinking a lot about families where the parents may not have literacy in their first language, or may not be comfortable with the written word in their first language, or in any language. And there, it's so important for us as educators to remind parents that oral storytelling is also a really important educational gift they can give their children. I think we all know, for immigrant families, kind of passing down the legacy and the kinds of connections that we get with stories. So for instance, my grandfather was a German Jewish refugee who fled to this country during World War II. And for both my mother and me, his stories of his childhood in Germany have been kind of key touchstones in our lives, and ways that we created a connection with him and his life that were incredibly important to us as humans, and also educationally, right? So storytelling develops a sense of narrative, it develops linguistic skills, and it's just connecting and incredibly important. And as teachers, we can reassure parents and honor that, and remind them that that's something that they can be doing with their children right now. It's also just comforting, right? To hear your parent or your caregiver tell a story, or even an older sibling, in situations where other people are acting as caregivers.
Thanks, Sarah. And now we just want to take a moment to acknowledge the challenges. We want to be positive, but we also want to just be real with each other and acknowledge what's going on. So we're in a difficult situation right now, and we're facing challenges for students, for teachers, for parents, and some of us are all of the above right now. Some of us are grad students who are teaching and are also parents. So for teachers, just stop and remember, we are people too. We have our own concerns, we have our own families, we have our own needs and circumstances. For those of us who are teaching and maybe are completely home alone, it is pretty easy to find yourself working all day and trying to connect all day, or being on media all day. Give yourself some time for yourself, and that's okay too. Some of us are also homeschooling, caring for our own families, facing uncertainty, and missing our students. I miss my students, and we also have to acknowledge that we or a loved one may fall ill. And some of my grad students have fallen ill. They were all teaching in the same school together, and they were actually expected to report to work last week. It's a charter to do planning for online instruction. And they were commuting and going into the school, even though the students were not. And 3 of them have fallen ill. And, just be kind to yourself. What you're learning about me, and if you've ever been in my classes, I see some familiar names in here, is I love cartoons and memes and things like that. So just like this little frog here, sometimes all you can do is just hang on. And I don't know, I think this makes me laugh because of his little frog butt. So just
It's adorable. Um, but almost to go back to our topic, this is also something we can model to the families that we work with, that we're all in this together and we're all just doing our best. And there's enough anxiety as it is without adding on to the anxiety of like, am I gonna do okay as an educator? So to be real, I think, is one of the greatest gifts we can give our families right now.
and then we also know the challenges that our parents are having. There's challenges of daily life and uncertainty. There's a lot of food and housing insecurity. And then there's also the confidence and the skills to homeschool. So we want to acknowledge that with parents too, and kind of be their cheerleader for being the teacher at home. For students, they could also be having challenges with family relationships, which we highlighted in the beginning, the importance of bolstering those relationships. Our students could also be caring for siblings. And there could be some learning challenges going on as well. Just suddenly because you're not in school doesn't mean the learning difficulties that you faced and the extra support as a special education student you needed before now go away, because there's even more distraction at home in the high stress levels. Sarah, do you have anything to add for this one?
I really want to emphasize again the confidence and skills to homeschool, because when I talk with parents, this is a big thing. And on the one hand, I think being real with the fact that for children, I mean, I would say all the way up to high school, but certainly up through middle school, even if the school is providing a lot of online support, it's not enough we can't expect our students to just kind of sit down in front of the computer and learn, or our children to do that. So to a certain extent, I think some parents may need to be a little bit more involved than they had thought, not necessarily with the content, but with the kinds of routines and making schedules, like checking in with their children at the beginning of the day, like, what do you need to do today, and regular check-ins. That's going to be what allows the kind of work that the school is doing to happen. And then at the same time, there are parents that are just feeling completely overwhelmed. And so for us as teachers, being aware of those two different ends of the spectrum and being ready to meet parents where they are, in the same way that we meet students where they are, and kind of acknowledge the challenges and offer the supports that we can.
Sorry, I had to mute myself because my baby's crying downstairs.
Yeah.
Like, she's in a mood, and she decided that she doesn't like bottles. This is her new thing.
Oh, that's so hard.
So that's one thing. Also, technology is a challenge in itself, and we've been even experiencing those just in this webinar. And sometimes the internet goes out. There's technology in itself, the physical objects we use, and then there's teachnology, which is sort of a broad term, but we refer to a lot of educational tools that are technological. We have to remember there's a spectrum of levels of tech available to us and our students. We could have old tech. We could have maybe one really good quality laptop that a family is now sharing for 2 parents to do work and 2 or 3 children to do schoolwork on. You want to plan for the best, but expect the worst. So we want to offer our students the opportunity to learn in all the different ways that the variety of our districts and our states are doing to help students learn remotely. But we have to go with the flow with what's happening and be flexible. And we want to communicate that with parents too, because we don't want them already to be in insecure situations at home and challenges, and then feel even worse because they don't have the technology to support their children with. And feel like, well, if we're going to have to choose between rent, food, and a laptop, I value education, so we're going to go out and get a laptop for the kids. We need to reinforce to them, and I know a family that did this recently, that a teacher of mine works with. We need to reinforce to them, no, that's okay. You don't need all the high tech to do this. It's okay if it doesn't work. And there are other ways that we can manage. And if the internet goes down, try not to, have a heart attack, because all our work's online now, right?
Right.
Even before this, I would be sitting on campus at college, at one of the colleges, and the internet goes out. Everybody, like, you peek your head out of your office. You're like, is your internet out? Is your internet out? I don't know. And I know people are doing the same thing. They're like peeking their head out of their apartments, be like, hey, are you online? Is your Wi-Fi going? And like that happens, and it's okay if the internet goes out. It gives us an opportunity to have those other times in the day to connect with our children, to connect with our partners, with ourselves. It doesn't always have to be online, because we also want to acknowledge that it's exhausting being on video chat all day. It's harder for us to read one another in these tiny little window panes while you're trying to read, while you have pop-up notifications. While I will confess, the president of New York State TESOL is here with us today, Dr. Laura Becker, and she's texting me, which is awesome because I love hearing from her. But I'm like, I'm presenting, Laura. And now she's probably going to text me back in LOL. But there's all kinds of distractions, and technology itself is a distraction. And we're learning mainly through technology right now. And that's a challenge in itself, too.
Which brings me back to a few of our themes for today. One is taking the time to make the routines and figure out how to use whatever it is that we have. So really encouraging parents to take a few days, take a week, and learn the technology with their children and build those routines, and then kind of move, not expect like instant onto the complex math work. It's going to take some time, and I think we need to know that, but we also need to make sure that parents know that we know that, and that that's to be expected, and it's worth that time to get things set up and figure out how to use the tools we have. And then to go back to play, to remember the importance of the kinds of physical hands-on activities that are so key to learning, and to help encourage parents to realize that that's learning also. And so we can make suggestions for things that parents can do with their children, but also just help them remember that things like cooking and dancing and sewing, or whatever it is that a family does that's physical and non-technological, is particularly important right now when there's so much screen time in all of our lives.
Thanks, Sarah. So we've come to the end of our presentation, and I want to thank everyone for participating. We have a few more bits of information to share with you. It's really important that you send us your contact info. We disabled chat because we have such a large number of people. And like I said, we wanted to be realistic about helping you, and the two of us, while presenting, can't manage 100 people in chat. So we do want to answer your questions. We do want to hear from you. So we've created a Google form. It's linked here, or you can also take a picture of this QR code. Just hold your phone up to the screen. I can even show you, I can model with my iPhone. If you go into your camera and you just hold it up to the screen, it'll say open in Safari, and it's going to take you right to our Google form. Did it work for you, Sarah?
I'm just trying it right now. Let's see here. This is magic. Speaking of technology. Yes.
So please go ahead, just put your phone in camera mode, put it up to the screen. It'll take you right to that link. You could also type it in, forms.gle, blah, 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 which is what we have here. Complete that form so we can respond to your questions. And then we'll also send you these slides and other resources as well. I'm going to come back to this as the last screen, but I need to show you a few more things. If you're a New York State educator, and I know not everyone logging in is, I have some friends from other states here, thank you for joining. You can earn CTLE credit through New York State TESOL. We are an approved CTLE provider. Just because school has stopped, PD at school just hasn't stopped, doesn't mean you still can't record that, these hours that you're spending for participating towards your professional certification. This is a really long link. I will also send you this link after you complete our contact form. You may have come to us today because you're already a member of New York State TESOL, but if you came to us today through social media or through another friend, I encourage you please to join New York State TESOL. The link is there. I will also send you the link through our QR code, and it's $20.20 to join for the rest of the year in honor of 2020 and our 50th anniversary as an organization that supports teachers of English to speakers of other languages, not just in New York, but all around the country and overseas. We're a leader in our field, and we're proud to be here for you today and to be a part of it. So if you're not already a member, I encourage you to join. I'm gonna go back just to this slide to say, please click in and send us your contact information.
Mhm.
That way we can send you these slides, other resources, and keep in touch and answer your questions. There's a box where you can put your questions in. What we're going to do is look for similar questions, synthesize them, and then send them out. That's also us modeling how we can be responsive online educators when it's really hard to manage a Zoom chat with, I mean, the graduate class I teach has 24 students in it, and even then it gets a little crazy. So that's why we did disable chat today, and I appreciate you understanding that, because I know we all have a lot to say and share. But please do so through that form, and we will consider, and we look forward to all your questions, responses, and getting back to you.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And most of all, again, truly thank you for the work that you're doing right now.
Thanks, everybody. Hang in there.
Take care of yourselves. Yeah.
Here, I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a few more minutes.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Bye.